Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us at this webinar around send capability. We'll just wait a few minutes for everyone to log in. If you've just joined us, we're just going to wait a couple more minutes for people to join into the webinar. We'll just give it a couple more minutes. Okay, well, the people dialing in has slowed down now, so let's get started. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to this webinar during which we'll talk about implementation of eInvoicing send capability. My name's Lisa Archbold. I'm the implementation manager on the eInvoicing team here. If you ever have any technical type of queries, I'm generally the person you'll speak with. So now for a bit of housekeeping, we'll send out a copy of the presentation after the webinar. So this will contain links of relevance that I mentioned through the webinar, and Alison, our adoption advisor, will be pasting into the chat throughout the webinar also. We're also recording the webinar. It'll be saved on our website, and we'll share a link with you in about 2 weeks. The core presentation is around 30 minutes, maybe a bit longer, and the remainder of the time will be to work through your questions. And if your questions do remain unanswered at the end of the webinar, then please redirect them to eInvoicing@nb.gov.nz. And I will just say around questions as well that please could you use the Q&A function rather than the chat. It's much easier for us to see your questions, and we're just looking at one area of the webinar rather than both. So please use the Q&A, not the chat. We'll be putting a few online polls towards the end of the webinar. And once again, Alison will drop a link in the chat for you closer to the time. And lastly, many of you who joined us today are from local government organisations. This webinar is more targeted towards you, but then also supplies to government in general. And the content's very relevant for all of you. I also see some of you have joined us from the private sector. I'd like to think that you'll all get something out of this webinar. Right, so let's move on and hand over to my colleague Linda, who is going to go through the MB Karakia. Thanks, Linda.
Kia ora. Te whia te mana kia mau kia maia, ka huri taku aro kei te pai kahurangi, kei reira tō oranga moko, ma mahi tahi ka ora ka pūwai, a mātou mahi ka toa ka puna ka tika, ti hei Māori ora.
Thank you, Linda. Right, so if we could move over to the agenda, please, on the next slide. So here's what we'll cover today. In November, we ran a webinar that covered invoice send capability at a higher level. Today's sessions follow on from this and will involve us diving a bit deeper into the technical side of implementation. We'll also cover the resources we have available and some pro tips that we've picked up along the way. I should say that the content we're covering assumes that audience is already on the journey, whether it's planning or whether it's testing or going live or whatever. So hoping that the content won't be completely foreign to any of you. I'd also like to note that many of the attendees here today also attended our webinar on e-invoice receive capability last week. So just wanted to say in advance that you'll probably note some duplication of content in some areas, but there's also important scene-specific content being covered as well. Okay, so just to give background on the invoicing team's role in People, we essentially are the New Zealand People Authority, and which sits within NB. We have a small team, but we cover many aspects such as the People standards, specifications, stakeholder engagement, and the technical and non-technical side of how to implement e-invoicing. We work closely with the Australian People Authority, which is inside the Australian Tax Office, and we share the Australia-New Zealand People standard amongst other functions. For example, we have a mutual accreditation program for access point providers. All right, next slide, please. So I'm going to start off with talking about the e-invoicing business guide first. This was written by us and in conjunction with the ATO, Australian Tax Office, sorry, and it really just documenting our experiences and some how-to information around implementations after having learned a lot of lessons from about 60 or so government e-invoicing implementations. We also had some valuable input from some of the champions for e-invoicing in some of the government agencies and also some industry specialists. Most things you'll need to know are covered clearly in this document, and it's written to cover a wide range of readers. So whether you're a technical person working on the technical side of the project, whether you're a project sponsor, whether you're a user, it should all be relevant, and it's written to apply to everybody. And you can lean on other resources available from MB as well, your provider and other agencies. There'll be links to our resources as we move through the webinar, and Alison will add these links in the chat. Thank you, Alison. So next slide, please. So what is People? People e-invoicing is the digital exchange of invoice information directly between suppliers and buyers' financial systems. This transfer is made possible by the sender and receiver each having e-invoice enabled software and an access point provider or two in the middle to transmit using the common People standard. So let's just touch on the NZBN first. The essential requirement for both suppliers and buyers is that both parties need to capture in their respective systems the other's NZBN. So the supplier's customer record must hold the customer's NZBN, and the buyer's supplier master record must hold the supplier's NZBN. And that's because the NZBN is the key identifier that enables the different systems to recognise each other as the correct buyer or supplier. In the invoicing environment, it effectively replaces the role that an email address played when sending PDF invoices. Right, so how it works in practice, the data flows through the four-corner model like this. You'll see in my diagram, we've got these little pictures labelled C1 through to C4. So C1 means corner one, and that's the supplier's billing system or financial management information software. So the supplier system creates the invoice, and that has to include the supplier's NZBN and the buyer's NZBN, because we need to know who the buyer is and how the network is going to identify that buyer. So under the old PDF email model, the invoice was delivered via an email address. With invoicing, it relies entirely on the NZBN, so including it is absolutely essential. Then once prepared, the invoice is passed from corner one to the supplier's access point provider, which is corner two. the supplier's access point provider receives the e-invoice, does its initial checks, such as verifying all of the mandatory people fields, such as supplier and buyer's NZBN, sorry, and then looks up the NZBN for the buyer on the people network. So this is why the NZBN also is so important. And then the lookup checks that the buyer is registered, and then if they are, to make sure that they're able to receive e-invoices, and then also identifies who the access point provider is that looks after that buyer. If all these conditions are met, then the access point provider for the supplier sends it off to the corner 3, which is the buyer's access point provider. So they're the access point provider that is actually acting for the buyer. So they go through and perform all their further checks. They revalidate that e-invoice that's coming through, just to make sure again that it aligns with the PEPAL standard, and then it applies any data transformation rules that have been requested by the buyer. And then at that point, if all is well, then the corner 3, the access point provider for the buyer, sends off the invoice to the buyer's financial management software, which is the corner 4. When the e-invoice arrives at the corner 4, it typically passes through a processing queue in the FMIS. Just it always there are so many different systems. The actual workflow differs system to system, but generally that's how it works. It turns up in a processing queue first. And the first and most important match performed is on the NZBN. If the buyer has the supplier's NZBN stored correctly in their supply records, then the e-invoice can be automatically assigned to the correct supplier account. From there, the system performs additional validation, such as checking references. If all of the required information is present, the invoice can progress through the buyer's internal workflow, potentially all the way to approval and payment, depending on which FMIS is being used and how it's been configured. And as I said, the workflows will vary much between systems, but the correct NZBN matching is the fundamental part to making automation possible. The access point providers, as I mentioned, with respect to data transformation services, they offer a number of services in that corner 2, corner 3, corner 4 area, and we'll cover that a bit more soon when we talk a little bit about messaging. Okay, next slide, please. So there are 3 distinct parts to a successful implementation. There's the software piece, the e-invoicing connection piece, and the business process trading partner onboarding piece. We'll cover each of these in more detail on the next slides. Could we go to the next slide, please? The first step is to confirm the software that will send your e-invoices. So you may use a few different types of software for your billing, especially the larger suppliers. And we see it quite often with larger businesses that have acquired other businesses along the way, that they end up with using different software for different things. So it's worth noting that the NZ government procurement rules have recently been upsized to include councils and wider government. And I know that we have a number of representatives from both of those today, both of those sectors today. And then along with this, as of January next year, there'll be a requirement for government agencies to request e-invoices from their large suppliers as well. And I'm guessing that's also why some of you are here. The business guide contains detailed information about ways of implementing e-invoicing, but the key is that the government procurement rules refer to your primary system. So that's the main system from which you send your customer invoices through now. And when we think about software send capability, e-invoicing works best in your natural business software. And by this, we mean your billing or your finance systems, your ERPs, mail houses. It's really just another channel that sits alongside your existing channels. And with respect to mail houses, I just thought I'd call this out. We've seen some quite interesting, good ways of onboarding their customers. Essentially, it's around opting in or opting out. So Bunnings, for example, when they went live a year or so ago, they basically registered all of their customers who were registered on the network already, and then they let their customers know if they didn't want to be receiving e-invoices from them. And then we've seen other ones, other implementations where they've done an opt-in situation where people have to, or companies have to make contact with them to opt in. Right, next slide, please. So this one is about connecting to the PayPal network, and it's really how your software is going to get into that PayPal network. And really here we're talking about two aspects. So we're first talking about whether your software already has functionality to create and send invoices, as well as whether the software can directly connect to the PayPal network. I mentioned access points earlier in corner 2 and corner 3. So some software has an inbuilt access point. A few of them do at least, many don't, but this is the difference between a system where you don't necessarily need to engage an access point provider to send. And for example, the software that I would mention right now that has the inbuilt access point systems such as SAP Xero, MYOB. They're essentially have an access point working in behind the scenes. And so it's one of the first things to check whether that's the case, or whether you need to engage an access point. And so we've got so many systems around which are already capable of sending invoices. If I just list a handful, and particularly ones that government are using, Technology One, Oracle Fusion, Microsoft Business Central, SAP, Xero, MYOB, Magic, they're all capable. And if you're not sure, just contact your provider and find out. We also have a list of invoicing capable software products on our website, and the link is there on the slide, and Alison will add it to the chat too. If your software isn't capable, then there are still options available to you. For example, your mailhouse provider may have a plug and play option, or an access point provider may also be able to help. We're also aware that some of you may have your own purpose-built ERPs, in which case you're probably going to have to invest in having that invoicing functionality added. So the next thing to consider is how your software is going to connect to the network, and I have touched on it a little already, but what I would say is that we have a list on our website of all of the access point providers, and also and all of these access point providers are accredited with the New Zealand and Australian PayPal authorities, and the link to that has been posted in the chat. And if you're a government agency and you need the services of an access point provider, then there's a government syndicated panel in place with 7 providers to choose from. MB has done the procurement on your behalf, so you don't need to run a full process of procurement. And all of these panel providers have done many successful implementations. If you haven't already, go to the NZ Government Procurement website for detail about the open agreement, and to check what the process is for requesting the buyer's guide. Generally, you start by emailing the commercial services desk, and it will involve signing an NDA. Alison will post a link in the chat to our list of panel providers on our New Zealand Government Procurement website. Okay, could we go to the next slide, please? So the next piece is about business process, change management, customer onboarding areas, which all kind of fit together quite nicely. The transition from emailing your PDFs to sending invoices is going to take some time, and we have to be realistic about that. And the speed at which this happens is really up to you, and depends on the rate, on how quickly you can transition your customers to this channel. It also, of course, is about what the enablement is of your receiving customers. So if we talk about business process first, this is all about reviewing your current processes and consider those that will need to change to accommodate e-invoicing. We've seen that the most successful implementations where the processes are adapted to wrap around e-invoicing rather than the other way around. These might be business processes, or they might come about due to workflow changes in your system when the e-invoicing channel is added. But I must say it's a great opportunity to look at ways to find efficiencies and flush out processes that may have become troublesome or obsolete for your business. For example, emailing PDFs to the buyer contacts. E-invoicing has one endpoint and doesn't fall over if people go on holiday or leave. So the invoices are going straight to your customer system, and it's a really key difference, and it's a really good one. So on this, we've seen considerable value in suppliers and customers getting together to talk about the specifics of all their billing scenarios in the form of workshops and that sort of thing. These discussions tend to unearth a few tricky little processes that seem to just go on behind the scenes and a lot of people don't know about. And if left unchecked, then they have the potential to derail the efficiencies that you're going to get from e-invoicing. There's of course the classic one that I alluded to above, buyers requesting that they receive the emailed invoice directly. I've even heard of cases where the supplier is asked to send the invoice to multiple recipients, and the poor finance team's the last to know about the invoice. This can add days or even weeks to processing times. And the other one that we've commonly seen is staff ordering goods or services, and then they get the invoice directly to them, and then they go, oops, I was supposed to give a purchase order for that. So then they contact the supplier. Supplier has to then regenerate the invoice, either credit it or amend it, and resend it with the purchase order number on it. In a blue sky scenario, the purchase order would be provided at the time of ordering, so that it could be included on the invoice the first time, and then potentially with the purchase order and options around automation and systems, it could enable the receipt three-way matching automation kind of process, which is really worthwhile. It could cut down a lot of time. So in the end, these discussions will just provide you with richer information for which to go ahead with when mapping your processes and to see how they'll look under e-invoicing. So change management, some of us will say this is the hardest part, because this is the people part, really. So everyone responds to change differently, and we strongly recommend stressing to your users that e-invoicing is just another channel. There may be a few changes to everyday tasks, but over time, everyone will see the benefits. Less chasing payments for invoices, that kind of thing. This is something that takes time to address, but it can be managed with the appropriate training and preparation of user guides. It really does get easier with time, just like anything. All right, so it's really important to keep focus, keep motivated on transitioning your customers to e-invoicing. You'll see the benefits much faster if you do. And just try to focus in the beginning with those that have simple reference requirements. What I'd say is there is benefit in sending invoices to government agencies. Partly I say this because they're already e-invoice receive enabled, so they know what to expect when the e-invoices come in, and which makes it hopefully easier to onboard them. There's also the added bonus of e-invoices to government agencies having to be paid within 5 days. So you should see your reward pretty quickly. And then, so to help you along with that, we've developed a list of invoice reference requirements. So we've gone out to government agencies over the last while. So probably a few years ago, we first developed this, what we affectionately call the cheat sheet. So this is a list of approximately 30 agencies that are invoicing enabled already, and the references they want to receive, along with their NZBN numbers and contact emails. And we've recently gone through a task of upsizing the data. So we now be including about 110 agencies. We're just tidying that up at the moment, and we are soon to publish it on our website. Alison will put the link in the chat for that particular list. All right, and so something else that we've seen work really well for onboarding larger customers uses an onboarding questionnaire. So whenever they need to onboard a customer to eInvoicing, they first ask them to complete the questionnaire. So this captures deeper detail around what they expect to be included on their invoices. And because the information is being submitted as specific to that particular buyer supplier relationship, it just helps identify any intricacies that may have been missed and can perhaps be flagged and be included in the sending solution. Right, and then we do have a bunch of resources on our website, but just to call out a couple there, we've got the eInvoicing Change Management Guide, and we have the communication toolkit for eInvoice senders. Now, could we go to the next slide, please? So here I'd just like to talk a little bit about the technical components that underpin people eInvoicing. I don't want to spend too much time on this because I just want to give you a bit of an idea of how it all works so that you're aware. Essentially, when you receive or send an e-invoice on the people network, you have to use the PINT ANZ specification. So PINT meaning people international invoice, ANZ Australia New Zealand specification. So as I mentioned earlier, Australia and New Zealand share the same specification. And what it does is ensures consistency in the way that the invoice data is structured, validated, and exchanged. And it's mandatory for all of the access point providers I spoke about earlier operating in New Zealand and Australia. Okay, so what does it contain? It's typically the information you'd expect to capture on any invoice when you're creating it. So supply details, customer details, invoice number, dates, GST numbers, line items, totals, that kind of thing. And so those elements are transferred through as data through people in the same way every time, so that receiving systems can correctly interpret it. And there are about 200 structured data elements in the specification, but of that, about 25 to 30 are mandatory. And you'll see the list that I've put in the slide there, but essentially all of the ones that I mentioned just now. And just of course calling out the NZBN as well. So the supplier NZBN along with the buyer NZBN. All right, so why does it matter? It's just basically it ensures that sending and receiving systems interpret the data in the same way. And it allows the invoices to move seamlessly between the different software platforms across the people network. And so Australia and New Zealand were early adopters of this. We went live with this last year. One of the key things about the update to the specification that we went live with was that it supports international trade seamlessly. And so more jurisdictions worldwide, such as those in Europe and Asia, are catching up as well. Okay, next slide, please. So the other semi-technical document that goes hand in hand with the specification is the industry practice statement for invoice content. So this was developed by the New Zealand and Australian People Authorities, as well as the digital service providers of Australia and New Zealand. So whilst this isn't mandatory to align to this for organisations, the New Zealand panel providers, so those 7 access point providers I mentioned earlier, they are required to comply as part of their agreement to be on the panel. It's designed to be a practical, user-friendly resource to support organisations implementing the invoicing capability. So if you think about how it fits in with the specification provides the minimum requirements for interoperability, whereas the idea is that really if you just send the mandatory elements, it doesn't necessarily give medium to large businesses or agencies enough information to efficiently process those e-invoices. So this industry practice statement offers guidance to software vendors and access point providers to ensure particularly government buyers receive the information they need for smooth automated invoice processing. And so within this document, based on feedback that we've had, we've grouped these fields based on how commonly buyers have said that they need them, and also how important they're considered to be for interoperability in automated processing. And so we have the ratings: required interoperability, which is rated as the most important. So most frequently, frequently required by buyers, critical for enabling automatic invoice processing, and necessary for reliable interoperability across the network. And then we've got the recommended, which assists with quicker, more efficient processing by buyers, and tends to assist with things like three-way matching and POs and receipts and that sort of thing. And once again, helps with the straightforward processing between systems. And then there's the conditional. So the conditional we kind of have at the bottom of the 3 ratings, just because whilst they do provide much more rich context, there might be fields that some systems will support but others won't. For example, a purchase order line reference. If someone is a company is buying goods, or a government agency is buying goods, and their system might require the purchase order line number, but then maybe their supplier uses Xero, and so Xero can't support that. So it's really important to remember that whilst those fields are significant, they also have their limitations, given that different software supports different things. And so it's also prudent to, not for buyers not to expect all of those fields to be provided on their request. All right, so if we could go to the next slide, please. Pro tips and learnings. So we all know, I guess by now, the overall goal of eInvoicing is faster processing and payment of invoices. And we know that Bunnings Australia have seen 7-fold decrease in transmission failures since implementing eInvoicing and sending invoice to their customers. People, as a stable channel with very few error rates, invoices not received by customers, unlike the old emailing of PDFs, where they can very often get lost, unfortunately. And so the next point I'd like to mention is, while the technicalities of the implementation are underway, we strongly recommend you start collecting NZBNs right now and make it a priority. It's a job that you can just carry on within the background and just keep working on. And the next point would be, get the right people on the project team. So make sure you've got a project sponsor. We need someone who's going to own the project, and you should have a good mix of users, the people that are at the coalface, and the technical experts. We find that works the best. So purchase orders and buy references can be a significant challenge. These provide the essential context that tells your customers what each invoice relates to. It's important to take the time to identify the correct references required for your customer, as I've mentioned earlier, and ensure that your data and processes are mapped so that this information is consistently captured. I also want to reiterate the importance of conducting both data mapping and process mapping. This is one of the most common areas where organisations experience early invoicing issues. So investing the time up front saves effort later. And as mentioned earlier, we strongly recommend a data mapping exercise, and that's particularly important around references. And this helps confirm that all your necessary data that you're used to sending to your customers and they're used to receiving, especially references and notes, will be included and transmitted correctly when the invoices are sent. And just because, as I mentioned, the different software managers handles the data fields differently with respect to how they're seen in the receiving and sending system. Don't forget that some customers may not be able to receive certain fields you send, or yours on the other side, your software might not be able to send data your customer expects to receive. It's definitely a place for flexibility there. And each product manages fields in its own way, and it can create mismatches. If I use an example of Xero, so on the face of it, if you were creating an invoice in Xero, it looks like you only have one reference option, so one reference field to enter something in. But actually, Xero, when you can put in particular syntax to be able to map to more than one reference, so you can send to your buyer reference as well as your purchase order reference. And Xero has good resources on this on their website, and there's a link on the slide, and Alison will add a link to the chat. Essentially, it's if you want to say your general reference, you might have put somebody's name or a cost center number or something like that. Put a comma, and then for your purchase order number, you'd put PO : and then put your purchase order number after that. When the invoice is received by the receiver, then that invoice will have the cost center come through into their buyer reference, and the purchase order number will land in their order reference. So it's actually quite a good resource, and encourage you, if you're using Xero, or if you even have customers that use Xero, it's a really good thing to know about. So credit note handling is a bit of a trick. There are some systems that don't actually support credit note, e-credit notes. There is a separate technical specification, and so some receivers aren't registered on the network to receive credit notes. So we suggest that when you're building your sending solution, that you just incorporate the credit notes inside your e-invoice specification. It's already there, all ready to go. You don't necessarily need to go off and use the separate credit note specification. It's essentially it's created as an invoice, but it's a negative value invoice. It looks almost exactly the same. You've just got negative quantities as opposed to positive, and it works exactly the same way. And the benefit of that also is that when you're sending e-invoices, your system doesn't need to go off and check whether that customer can receive e-credit notes. If you're just sending one type of specification which manages both scenarios, then that's much more simple. So testing, make sure that you select your test partners so that you have a good cross-section of scenarios to avoid surprises after going live. It's really important. And perhaps we have some organisations here that use EDI to send invoices. This could be a good candidate either now or in the medium term to switch over to e-invoicing. And then once again, just try to get familiar with the industry practice statement for invoice content. So it's not just from a technical point of view, it's giving you a view of what the experience looks like when your e-invoice is sent and how it's received. All right, I promise I'm going to stop talking shortly. So our other considerations, which I'll just briefly touch on, consolidated invoices and utilities invoices. So with consolidated invoices, we know that a lot of agencies have specific processes to ingest consolidated invoices, and also for organisations sending those consolidated invoices. And at this point, they don't necessarily translate easily into the e-invoicing model. And along with this, if you're in the utility sector, so telecommunications, electricity, that kind of thing, then it's quite likely you'll send information that's additional to your run-of-the-mill invoice. It might be the sheer size of an invoice. I've seen really big, large phone invoices that might be phone service invoices that are up to 3,000 pages just for a month. And actually, when you look at what's being received, what's being entered by the receiver, they might just be putting a couple of lines in because they've got all the detail in another form, such as PDF or Excel, or they can access it via a portal. And then there's also with those utility type invoices, usually you'll see an opening balance, changes to opening balance are less payments, and then like a new opening balance, and then you've got your other information. So it's kind of a little bit like an invoice statement. And so e-invoicing doesn't cater to this. It's kind of e-invoicing is really more about billing for a good or service as you go, like maybe one instance per invoice. And there's so much to think about, and now with the larger suppliers being required to send e-invoices to government agencies by January next year, this subject is really becoming front of mind for us. So we're getting together with other government agencies and going to survey their requirements and set up some working groups to work through just how we're going to attack this. And the result basically will be building and documenting suitable models of what these implementations could look like. Yes, so that's on our work agenda for this year. And then also, access point providers, they're the experts in implementing, and one of the things that they do is invoice response options. So we talked about invoices being emailed by PDF and getting lost in someone's inbox, or someone's on leave, or that kind of thing. Invoice response for sending is available from your access point providers. So you can send an e-invoice and then get a message back to say that it was successful or not. And also at the other end, of the buyer's end, the access point provider can send messages back should an invoice be rejected for some reason. And then they also do some quite cool added value services, things like data transformation validation. So maybe checking for a purchase order number on the way through, or checking for references that might be potentially mapping to the wrong place and remapping them to where that organisation needs them. And last thing from me, I just wanted to quickly talk about the e-invoicing community of practice, or what we call the ECOP. So this is the quarterly knowledge sharing and networking meeting for private organisations. We mostly discuss invoicing and payment time journeys, and because payment time has been sitting with us for a while, and the ECOP is a useful platform to network, meet people, share notes, and collectively solve problems. It's just, we've found it so invaluable for our stakeholders to share and help each other. The next one is on the 19th of March, and if you would like to join us, if you're not already on the invite, then please email us at the e-invoicing at nb.gov address to register, please. Okay, now I am finished. So now's the time to answer your questions. But before we do that, we're going to put a couple of online polls on the screen for you to participate in, please. All right, so what stage are you at your e-invoice send journey? Alison's posting a link in the chat for you to attach to this. Right, we've got lots of people at the investigating stage, about 50-50 with working through it. So the next question, would you be interested in attending another SEND webinar later this year, maybe focusing on particular areas? Great. And so this is a question where you can put your own text in here to mention what particular area you'd like to know more about. And the last question, did you find this webinar useful? All right. Well, that's good to see. Okay, so now we're going to open this up to you all and to my wider team to go through questions and answers.
Right, Lise. Hello, Andrew Cook here, Government Innovation Manager for the team. So I'm going to pass the first question to you, Lise. It's from Barry Derwin, and Barry's asking, for the credit note handling, does this include debit notes or other non-invoice related documents?
So debit notes probably would fall into the invoice specification, and non-invoice related documents, such as adjustments and that kind of thing. At this point, there are only we can only use the invoice specification for adding a something owing to an account. So yeah, it would have to be credit note handling, debit notes. Yeah, that's right. I mean, it would all you could get it all managed inside the invoice specification. But feel free, Barry, to contact me separately to talk about specific examples.
Right, have you got the Q&A on screen, Lise?
Yes, I have. So
Okay.
Katie is the next one.
Yeah, go for it.
Yes, definitely you can manage discounts on an e-invoice. There are fields in there to cater to all of that. But it does depend on, I guess, the software that you're using. And so I couldn't answer that question right off the top of my head about whether Xero manages discounts or not, but I can take that away and get in touch with you, Katie. All right, next question. What happens if the portal is down? Well, it's not a portal as such. It depends what you mean by a portal, but it's actually a network that just carries the invoices through. So I've never seen
possible,
the people network to go down.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that. I was going to say, is it possible that the invoicing network goes down for some reason and therefore can't pass invoices through? Is that perhaps that's a question? Perhaps that's what he was asking.
We've never seen the e-invoicing network go down. I guess it's possible that specific access point providers might go down, but then that's highly unlikely also. But if there was a problem, the access, it's probably more a question for your access point provider, to be fair, than me. But every e-invoice is sent as a message in an XML file. So I guess they would hold on to that message until their network was up again. But there is the people network the people SML can go down sometimes. The people search function, can go down sometimes. But there are multiple ways of and that's to identify an NZBN for a receiver. So yeah, it's not something that's a big issue at all. But if you want to talk about this more, please let us know and or talk to your access point provider about it, because they will know the answer straight off, I'm sure. The invoice data isn't stored. They're sent as messages in XML. So they just pass through the network. Once again, it sounds like an access point provider question. All right. We are asked to provide attachments with invoice receipts or specific agency templates. Are these managed in the template, or will they need to be sent separately? So there is functionality to attach additional documents, whether it's a simple PDF of an invoice or whether it's a timesheet or something like that. So there is definitely space in there to include attachments and additional data. The specifics, I guess you'd need to sort out when you're building your solution or talk to your software and service provider. Next one, is e-invoicing meant to be an enabler for payment times reporting, i.e. data is consistent? Want to answer that, Andrew?
Yeah, I'll give it a go. Well, yes and no. I mean, as Lisa mentioned earlier on in the presentation, e-invoicing, it's just another channel. It's yes, there are a number of countries that have adopted e-invoicing as a tax reporting solution, but that's not the path New Zealand is going down. So essentially no, but it does mean that you have richer data that gets into your system faster, and of course faster payment as well.
Okay,
Andrew, sorry, Andrew, I've just so I guess the question was around, is that e-invoicing meant to be an enabler for payment times reporting? So I guess is the answer yes?
Well, is it an enabler? I mean, not necessarily, because payment time reporting is the data at the end of the system. So no, it's, as I say, it's just another channel.
And we have generally the payment time reporting is already available in your software, regardless of whether it's an invoice or not. Okay. Sorry.
You go, Les.
Are there any stats about the different e-invoicing enabled software that government agencies are using would help with data mapping and knowing whether the info passed through would actually be surfaced or not surfaced? We definitely have on our records the different systems that government agencies use. We can talk to you about that separately if you wish. Okay. All right. What certification accreditation is done for the access point providers? So we go through an accreditation process, which essentially starts with at the time that the access point provider will apply to be accredited. There are checks such as criminal checks, that they have insurance, indemnity insurance, basically that they are who they say they are. And then as well as that, they need to submit a security questionnaire, which is basically a document that lists out all of their security infrastructure. But as well as that, they generally will have ISO 27001 certification already, and that's usually a big part of it. But basically the security questionnaire is when it was received, it's passed on to security team, cybersecurity team to work through, and they check down to the nth degree everything that's provided in there, and then go and satisfy directly with the access point providers the questions that they might have. No one gets accredited until our cybersecurity team are fully satisfied. Okay, is 24/7 support available? For what?
Yes, that would be from their access point provider, or that's kind of support you're looking for.
Yeah, if
that
you're
would be your first call.
Yeah. If you're talking about the access point providers, then I know with respect to the panel providers, for example, those seven panel providers are within their agency agreement. They have their support hours and timeframes all set out in that document. So that could be made available to you if you're particularly concerned about a provider. But they might be all different, but generally they all have processes in place for anything that might happen. Is that the end of the questions?
That looks like the last one, Les.
Is anybody else? We've got what, 5 minutes left. And does anybody else have anything they would like to know? Feel free to speak up should you wish. No? All right, well, it looks like people are dropping off now. So I just want to thank you all for attending this webinar. I hope you found it useful. And we'll be sending out the presentation and all other supporting information after this. Thank you so much, everyone.